Welcome to America Intelligence Media. I'm Thomas Paine. Today, I'm speaking with Michael McKibben. Michael, welcome.
Well, thank you very much.
We are so thrilled because of the work that you've been doing. It just has, I don't know, it's like a rocket. It just keeps going up and up and up, and it looks like it's headed to some amazing place. So you have been down in the mines, and it's kind of like, the old Tolkien thing, down in the mines of Moria, you also not only get the best metal
Right.
and jewels, you get monsters, Balrogs. So I believe you have uncovered a few Balrogs in your research lately. Can you tell us about this golden share or any of these kind of what we'd call, I would call them the evil streams of channeling off and money from America as a parasite? That's what I'd call it, but I'm a little bit edgy, as it were. So what has impressed you most from your most recent research, Michael?
The the level of coordination that has been developing throughout the world for hundreds of years, which we're now just beginning to see the tips of these icebergs, and it's shocking to me to realize how much I was not taught in school about this history, and B, how much has been withheld from the teaching of American and world history. It's just incredible what's actually out there, and I think that the main issue here is, given my engineering background, one of the things you learn to do with complex problems is you've got to break them down into their components first, and then you do some sort of flow chart to see how they all fit together in a Gantt chart, in a PERT chart, and how they developed over time, and then how they become a complete system. And so those are the kinds of perspectives that are coming into focus now with this study of what's really going on in our government related to various companies that are coming to the fore in both the United States and in Britain and in other parts of the world. And to see the way things are really operating and the way money is really flowing among these organizations, we are literally looking at a massive Ponzi scheme where these organizations and people feed each other in a perpetual loop. And it certainly appears, I've heard this before, but now I can see the actual flow chart, that the glue that keeps this system moving and perpetuating itself is literally war. And that war is the one controllable element in their system because of the way they've taken control of our media and have taken control of certain government funding agencies that provide funding ostensibly for humanitarian projects around the world. It is really clear that money is really to foment instability around the world in order to create more excuses for war, that create more excuses for finance and the flow of monies, with the core of their receptacle being our largest defense contractors, that being Lockheed Martin, and that being BAE Systems, British Aerospace in England. And then we started tracing the controls of these companies back to their source, and this one really blows my mind, that the source is really a golden share that is held by the Crown in the UK. When the British privatized, I was actually living in England for a number of years, and the British were privatizing back in the day when we lived there. And on the surface, it looks like these publicly held companies held by the Crown, were privatizing and allowing other investors. And what I never looked at was what was really going on. And while they did create these stock companies with various levels of stock that allowed people to invest, there was always this one share that was issued to, on the surface, it was issued to the Secretary of State for Industry and Commerce, I believe that's the name, but don't quote me on that. That was an agent of the Crown. And what we noticed is that all of these companies that were, quote, privatizing continue to have this golden share. And so it's clear that this was a going forward control mechanism by the Crown for all the companies in the British Commonwealth. And that continues to this day. And then we started seeing these very complicated alliances between certain industries in the UK and their very convoluted relationships back to American companies. And I think it was you or somebody put us onto this company, Serco. I guess the first time I ever heard about Serco was from Field McConnell. And so a number of people are now digging into the Serco connection, and lo and behold, we come to find out that Serco is held by the Crown in a golden share, and Serco and Lockheed Martin UK are two-thirds owner in AWE, which is Atomic Weapons Establishment in the UK, and essentially the Crown holds the golden share in that organization. And then we go on and we see that there is the equivalent of a golden share in a group called the Crown Agents, which has its American counterpart, Crown Agents USA, Washington, D.C., quite a long name. And that we then begin to see that this Crown Agents USA has contracts with the federal government in the United States, which is rather odd. It's like, why do we need to hire British agents for work in America? And then we learn that Serco has contracts, has hundreds, probably hundreds if you actually count them out, but I think there were 11 key contracts with open-ended, open-amount quantities with the U.S. government, and it spanned the countryside. Contracts with the, I'm going to read them, Air Force, Army, Border Patrol, Chicago, Coast Guard, Colorado, Commerce, DHS, DOJ, Department of State, ERO, FAA, FCC, FTC, State of Georgia, GSA, ICE, Border Patrol, and Intelligence, Los Angeles, the Marines, Navy, Pension Guarantee, Prisons, San Francisco, Space War, and Transportation. And that's just for starters. So we now see that agents of the British Crown are essentially running most of the essential services in the United States. And these are facts. And so one must ask, how did they ever get here? And then we see the obvious connection with the senior executive service, who are the ones in all these agencies that granted these contracts to Serco. So what we now see is a complete give-up of the sovereignty of the operation of America to the British Crown. That's completely clear from this. And that the major beneficiaries of war are these companies that are largely held by the Crown. And so there's this loop. So if you've got the complete control of the storyline that creates a war that generates funds for the organization, and then you enrich everyone in this particular loop, it's the reason their profits go up pretty much every year. You're not genius; you just know how to manipulate the system, and that's what we see has been going on for hundreds of years. I mean, this looks like it goes back to the very founding of America and how America started dealing with our economy after the British Army left. Then the British banking from the British UK in the City of London began developing various schemes to essentially take over our financial system in the United States. And so that continues to this day. So it appears to me, and I really hate to say this because I have many hundreds of friends in the UK, and they were very kind to us, and I love the country. So I don't say this with any happiness at all. But it looks like the Crown never gave up control of the U.S.
So those British loyalists from the American Revolution are still here, and our sovereignty is still being questioned and being worked against by a mechanism which we, especially you and us, have worked out that the senior executive service is in fact what would be called the shadow government, or some would call the deep state.
That's correct.
But I'd like to include, those are just bureaucrats and status quo career politicians who get paid more than the other civil servants. And that kind of sovereignty over a system that started in 1978 with the creation of the SES, where the civil service was basically overthrown, I think was the setup for the modern British Crown really getting their fingers into everything from data management to the patent office, to air traffic control, to buses, to everything. You name it, the data is being managed by a company that takes the money out of this country and takes it back to the Queen. And as you were pointing out, we were looking at the most expensive things in the world, nuclear weapons. And then we found, of course, that the Queen owns Rio Tinto, which for many, many years, decades, controlled the uranium market, because the 53 Commonwealth nations include, of course, Australia and Canada, which have the second, third largest holdings of uranium in the world, or in the top three. So we found out that the Queen, every place that there is money, all we had to do is say, where's the biggest money in America? Is it oil? Is it uranium? Is it weapons? Is it aerospace, where we find, and we're told in the alternative news by many people, that if you want to find the trillions that are missing, you simply have to look to the companies that create the airplanes, because that's where the money's being ripped off. That would be Lockheed Martin. That would be BAE, USA. That would be Boeing, Raytheon. So we're doing an expose on that, and we did an expose on all these different companies that tie back to the Queen. So it's not only just foreign aid, it's not only fake loans coming through the Overseas Private Investment Corporation, it's all of it. Everywhere we look, we find the tentacles of the British government, the Crown, that did not leave. And people don't understand that no one in Britain can question the Queen's business. That's law. And the Queen and the Bank of England are inextricably one. And it's run by her one appointee. So it comes down to one person, or as you say, the Secretary of Business or Secretary whatever, have these special shares. So you found this we're finding it everywhere we look.
Well, the one that's close to home for me is the management of the Patent Office that was given to Serco in 2006 and affirmed by a new contract with Obama in 2012 or 2013. And at first, I just why are they picking on the Patent Office? Why is this such an important aspect of their plan? And I've puzzled over that for 6-8 months. And I think we may be figuring this out, because one of the things you pointed out in the Hillary Clinton Uranium One scam was the way that we funded that tech center in Moscow, and then gave through Raytheon the Russians a bunch of our technology and missiles, so that we would actually create a worthy competitor that would then fuel this arms race, that would then fuel these companies and pad their accounts. And this system, this network, this Mobius strip, I don't know what you call it, this endless loop, would feed on itself and continue to operate. And so I was thinking, okay, what is the role of the Patent Office in that process? And then it dawned on me the other day as I was driving to meet some shareholders. The reason they have to have the Patent Office is that one of the things the physiologist will tell you is that when people get into a continuous mode of stealing from others and stealing their ideas and copying things, they stop thinking. They stop using their rational brain. And they start using their stimulus response part of their brain, the reptilian part of their brain. They don't know how to be creative any longer. So the one missing factor in this loop is if they don't have a continual injection of new, creative, actual new ideas into this system, it can't operate. So the Patent Office has been their feeding system that injects the ideas into this circle to make it successful. So you've got OPIC and you've got USAID. They give the money part into this network, and then the Patent Office gives the ideas. So that's why they have to have control of the ideas of the American inventor, and they're stealing them.
Well, in my crude way, I would say that they're vampires. They don't have any warm blood. They keep needing hosts. And right now, I just read an article the other day where people are getting very hip to what we have been working on, both with you and with Leaders Technologies and your geniuses and Americans for Innovation and Aim for Truth. We keep revealing these things, and now new articles are coming out. The recent article I saw said that 5,000 patents are being held right now this year, that were seized because of national security issues. So anytime a patent is given to David Kapos, isn't his name David? Yeah, from IBM.
He's the former patent office director.
Yes.
He left to go back to a law firm that's feeding on this system.
Oh, he's getting a bigger piece of the pie. Yeah, they didn't pay him enough through SES probably. So yes, he ran it, and he was there making sure that your inventions were stolen. And so, what we see is just the standard rule is centralize, monopolize, destroy your competition, and send it back to a small group of elite. Now, this sounds like a conspiracy, but you have proven this with your golden share and the way that it moves through the companies that we have looked at, which are the biggest companies, Urenco, BP, Shell, the one in Canada.
Well, let's pick Urenco, for example. Urenco runs our nuclear refinement center down in New Mexico, and you start digging into their financial statement, and it's always a bleak disclosure, but they don't totally not disclose it. I think that's for securities reasons. They've always got deniability. They don't explain it well, but it is there. There are three major holders of the stock in that company, and one of them is the Queen's company that's operating basically as British Nuclear Fuels Limited, that was renamed, I think especially for this American disclosure, to some innocuous company name you would never associate with nuclear fuels. But they were essentially hiding the fact that British Nuclear Fuels was essentially controlling a third of this operation. And that company has a golden share. So the Queen's, I don't like to say the Queen, the Crown, because I think Queen Elizabeth's probably a nice person. But anyway, I think the Crown, the people around her that are running this operation out of the City of London, are the ones controlling the financial mechanism for this global Mobius strip of corruption.
Absolutely. And war has always fed this system. And who creates the war? Well, insider traders. That would be the Knights of Malta.
Right.
When the royalty, the current royalty, and then the deposed royalty, they call the black royalty, and the richest people in the world who all take a vow of fealty to the head of the Knights of Malta, which right now is Pope Francis. They actually have the inside of what resources are going to be ripped off, what countries are going to be turned into chaos, what countries need a central bank, so on and so forth. So they sit around and they talk about the future, and these are the same people who run these monopolies. I remember Peter Thiel said, in this type of business we're in, this is a cyber war. There's only one business model that works, a monopoly. You must destroy all competition. And you can see this happening in the way that RCA, Radio Communications America, whatever it was called, turned into GE, General Electric, and then General Electric turned into Serco. But Serco adopted 3 other companies, and one of those companies had just bought out 20 other companies. So when the Queen came over here and started Serco, it was already set up for her by insiders over here, because monopolies have been going on since the time of Woodrow Wilson.
By the way, insiders from Lockheed. There was Lockheed insiders that started the company that Serco ended up buying, and then that bought them into all of our defense work.
Oh, that's right. And when you, as you pointed out, our top military contractor, Lockheed Martin, who also has the largest intelligence group in the world and is larger than any other section of our U.S. intelligence community, they are connected to the Queen and nuclear weapons in Britain, which then means nuclear weapons throughout the entire Commonwealth, which means nuclear weapons in Europe because the European Union, and in France and Holland and Germany. All these things are all connected. So when you look at the ownership of Urenco, it's owned by the Crown, literally the United Kingdom, Holland, and a couple companies in Germany, which are all state associated companies. So,
well, here's a good example of the convoluted relationship between the U.S. and the U.K. The AWD Management Limited's financial statement discloses that a third of their shares are owned by Serco, a third by Lockheed Martin UK, and a third by British Nuclear Fuels, which is the Queen's golden share. But then you read their financial statement, and they disclose the golden share in there, but then there's this comment by Ernst & Young at the end of their financial statements, like 27 pages on the last one we looked at, that says that the directors consider Lockheed Martin U.S. as the controlling entity for this organization. So in their financial statement, with the Queen's golden share, they say Lockheed Martin U.S. is their parent.
Well,
now, how screwed up is that?
That is so bizarre that we have yet to ferret that one out. And as we do, we're probably going to find something that I recently heard, a conspiracy theory, that basically Lockheed Martin is the war nation, and they're more powerful than any nation, and they ripped off the Pentagon for trillions of dollars, and their intelligence network makes sure that the control over the U.S. military is complete. So when you look at the idea that then Lockheed Martin somehow has a controlling interest over the entire Crown, and the Crown, as we were pointing out, has these astounding connections to everything back to the beginning. Who the heck is Lockheed Martin? We have yet to quite ferret that one out, but it's unfortunately probably the reality, since Comey worked for them, and that was when they were charged with, stealing just huge amounts of money. He also worked for HSBC, got them out of billion-dollar SEC suits. So these guys, Mueller, Comey, they go to these companies and they work for them to make sure they don't get charged with crimes. The crimes of Lockheed Martin are quite astounding, the ones we know of, but what we're finding out is the hidden crimes of Lockheed Martin, which may be, well, not maybe, it looks quite evident by the circumstantial evidence, a complete sellout of America, not even for the Crown, but for themselves.
Well, the greater crime is the number of people's lives that have been lost, families ruined, livelihoods destroyed, so that these people could foment wars to keep this system going. That is the real crime to me.
And that goes to British Petroleum. The Deepwater accident in our own Gulf, they had never even tested the safety devices. Never once. So they started on a project that everyone said couldn't work, and yet these British oil warmongers hadn't even tested the security devices. There is still an oil slick that, when it was predicted to hit Britain, was going to be the largest environmental disaster they've ever had. Fortunately, it came back out to sea. But someday when it hits, it will be another disaster, and it will continue to be a disaster for every shore that it hits. What did they do about that? Oh, they paid a small amount of money, which was just, the price of doing business, and then they went back and did it in
Right.
Alaska. How come we allow the Crown to pull up our own oil, our own gas, our own resources here in our own country? The Rio Tinto, Crown-owned Rio Tinto owns huge resources in America and always has, and owns huge portions of the uranium. But why is it that we keep giving these contracts to these people? Because, as you pointed out, the deep state, the shadow government, always goes with the standard operating procedure. And they give it to the same people they've been giving it to for decades, and no one even asked any questions about it.
Let's look at it a different way. we have a republic, at least on paper, where the power is vested in we the people. But Franklin, I think, Ben Franklin was concerned that giving power to the people may not work because the people may go to sleep and not keep it. And he specifically answered Mrs. Powell, what kind of government have you given us? And he said to her, a republic if you can keep it. And what it appears to me is we, the people, have gone to sleep. We have allowed this power to shift away from we, the people. And it is time, first we've got to figure out what the problem is, and now fix it. Otherwise, we don't deserve this republic.
You're absolutely
and that's where
right.
I think we are now.
And if we look at the corruption of the British system, and we look at things like the elite, the most elite, the monarchs, they don't answer questions to anybody. Their stuff is secret. They're all insider traders. They get the biggest piece of the pie before anybody else. They get the lion's share. How about the commoners? They don't even get to ask any questions whatsoever, but the commoners' money is linked to the Crown's money because it's linked to the Bank of England, and then it's linked to these liveries, what we used to call guilds, or mercers, or the mercers for international banking. There's a certain set group of people. They're in committees. Nobody knows who's in those committees. Only one person knows who is in all of the committees, and that is the Crown, and the person that she appoints as her executor for both the Bank of England and for her accounts. And then she gets ultimate veto power. So your golden share is so beautiful because when you look at it, you think, oh, my. She doesn't seem to have shares. She doesn't seem to get a piece of the pie, so on and so forth. No, that's not the way it works. Rio Tinto determines the markets on the resources that they used to be a complete monopoly on. And so no one knows what's in the ground, but if the Crown, Rio Tinto, says so much is in the ground, that determines the price of uranium worldwide. You see.
Well, I think most people, when they look at stock companies, they think too simply, because if they're not experienced with it, why would they know how this works? But you can create layers of stock where each layer has a successively larger or successively smaller number of rights. So within each class, you can have 1 million shares of Class B, but you can have one share of Class A that controls all 1 million shares of Class B. So it's how you write the rules and the privileges that are contained within that one holding. So you don't need a big number of shares to have full control. It's just how you write the attributes of that particular share, if that makes sense.
Sure, there's shareholders, and then there's the people who do the work. That would be the elite in America, and then the SES who do their work, because why? They're paid more than everyone. They have better benefits. They're part of the Senior Executive Association, which is a union that tells them what to do. Well, that's exactly what happens in Britain. And through groups like the Pilgrim Society, through groups like the Round Table Association, the Royal Institute for International Affairs, then those things filtered over into America, and we adopted their systems. We adopted the Council on Foreign Relations. So we adopted their system.
Here's a good example. Overseas Private Investment Corporation, OPIC. They say they're organized as a company, and they have a single shareholder who is the Secretary of State of the U.S., is holding the only share that exists in that company. So that's a controlling share. That's like a golden share. They don't issue other shares. Now, the really bizarre piece of that story is OPIC says it's a private corporation, and yet it's got a .gov account and operates as an agency and does FOIA requests and all the rest, and yet says it's not a government agency.
And it's run by SES.
Right.
Gets $108 million a year to run their budget, to simply write checks and not keep track of where the money goes. And to underscore what you just said, the Secretary of State has complete power through SES members, but she has complete power, when it was Hillary Clinton, to give away $50 billion a year. $50 billion a year.
Right.
But we can't get money to build a border, but we can give away, because we don't get anything from it. Nothing do we get from that $50 billion. Nothing, folks. Nothing. And, by the way, not a single penny of it goes to any foreigner or any foreign country. It goes to U.S. interests. It goes to banks. It goes to insurance companies, hedge funds. It goes to fake companies, offshore accounts. It goes everywhere except to where it says it's going. And recently an article pointed out that the over $3 billion that we gave away to Afghanistan, that they wasted it on like hundreds of millions on building a hotel or complete useless projects or ghost workers who weren't even there. And even the people in Afghanistan say, the $3 billion you gave us didn't do anything. That's the number one person that the Secretary of State right now just gave this year, $7 billion between Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Israel. Actually, Israel is either second or third. I said it wrong. Afghanistan, probably Israel, Iraq, and Syria. $7 billion of the $50 billion went to just those countries. And what did we get for it? Well, in Syria, Obama got what for it? He paid ISIS $1 billion a year and had been for years. Imagine that, folks. We paid ISIS from our USAID through the Secretary of State, through the one golden share, $1 billion to do what in Syria? You see, that's what comes from this stuff. So what we need to do is it needs to end. There doesn't need to be any U.S. aid. Period. Done. Doesn't need to be any OPEC. That's all fake. Done. Over. Just like, as we said in an audio last night, we pay 3 times over for this stuff. We pay the United Nations through the World Health Organization, the World Trade Organization, the World Bank, the International Monetary Fund, the UN Refugee Agency, the World Trade Organization. We pay tens of billions just in fees, in dues a year, and then tens of billions, hundreds of billions over time to foreign countries to do we think we're doing something, and the title of it sounds, oh, look, UN peacekeepers. No, they're not peacekeepers. They rape and they pillage, and it is disgusting why they continue. So what we're doing is we try to be generous through the UN. It's all fake. Trump says he's cutting it by 50%. He's already cut a lot of it. Then we pay through these aid agencies and OPEC and all these other things. And then we have all these groups, these philanthropic groups that also give. And when you look into that, it's crooked. And so what happens? Hillary Clinton looked at the crown and said, oh, look, Queen Elizabeth knows how to do this. She sees the flow of money, and then she siphons it off into her own pool.
That's very evident.
And she learned from the best. And who did the Queen learn from? The Pope. The Vatican City is immune from everything. They have their own law called canon law. They have their own bank that basically is the most corrupt bank in the world. And so the Queen learned from the Vatican, and we learned from the Queen, and people like Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama come along and say, how can I siphon off my piece of this river of money that's flowing? So they go, like we just said, to wherever the money flows. We look closely, and we discover the same thing. So all we need to do is cut it off at the root.
Right. So there's a expression in engineering called Q in equals Q out. It's not an expression; it's a formula. In other words, the flow in equals the flow out in a closed system. So right now, what we've got, we can see now the major mechanisms for the flow in of the money, of the influence, and of the power, and the ideas. So if you start cutting off the financing of the SES. Remove Serco for managing the patent office. Probably going to have to redo the patent office because it's so corrupted. And you start pulling the cash back from all these inputs, then the output will drop to zero. What's the output? The output is war, because that was the mechanism they needed to keep this system going. And for hundreds of years, we have been fooled into allowing ourselves to participate in these wars. Hopefully, we in the American Republic have had enough of this, and now we have the information, and we will, in fact, stop it, and hope President Trump will do that.
If you go to Wikipedia and you plug in central banks, and then you go and you plug in recent conflicts in the world, you will find that everywhere there has been a conflict, right afterwards, a central bank moves in.
Yep.
So when we're talking about war, we're talking about the very people who funded both sides of the war, and their intent is to create their own bank so that after the war debt is owed to them. They loan out fiat currency, paper currency, against nothing except credit that they say that, that you trust these central bankers because they're central bankers. But anyway, they loan out the money to the common folks so that they have a currency, but they have to pay an interest on it. And because inflation always increases, you can never pay off the debt. It is an onerous debt. It is a fake debt. It's the trick they use in all central banks. And this isn't a myth. Go and look up Rothschild central banks, and you will find there's 127 or something central banks in the world, and 90 of them or so are Rothschild central banks, owned by the Rothschild family. And if they're not, they're owned by the country. And the 7 countries that didn't have a central bank are the ones that we're at war with right now. This is no coincidence. This is an old pattern called the Dutch and British East India Company, trading with a sword or trading by the sword. They get what they want, and war is always profitable because once chaos is started, you have a chance to fleece the resources and to take control and set up a bank, a central bank for that nation that then basically controls all war debt. And anytime, that they start to pay off the debt, or if they look like they're going to pay off the debt, you just simply bring in the CIA. You bring in George Soros and his non-governmental organizations, and bingo, a color revolution puts it right back into economic chaos where the economic terrorists like George Soros come in and take advantage of the situation. So it's the same old pattern because when the British East India Company was founded, there was a secret member who was basically one of the top people in control of Britain. And he decided to go with the corporation of the British East India Company rather than the British government because the British East India Company was more powerful. Our corporations are more powerful than our nations. And Lockheed Martin, if it is true what I'm reading, is more powerful than any nation on the face of the earth because they control war.
It appears so.
It's kind of sad and shocking, but hello, it's a corporation. We close it down. Done. I don't care what contracts they have with nuclear, whatever. First off, the whole nuclear thing is a gigantic fraud. I mean, we can see through Uranium One that Putin was fighting with the Crown, with the British Urenco forces. And in Eunice, New Mexico, where they were enriching uranium, Putin was getting Americans to use Oak Ridge to enrich uranium for him. So the uranium war happened right here on our turf for 10 years under Mueller's command at FBI, under Andrew McCabe's direct supervision. They allowed this war to go on for 10 years. And in the end, the Queen won because they put Tenam, the company, they took him out of business and they locked up Vidam Minikin. But they let it go on for 10 years. And before that, it went on with megatons for megawatts where the Russians controlled our uranium. Well, the Queen didn't like that. And if you knew the deal with the Queen with Urenco, she comes over and she says she's going to build these 3 companies in 3 countries. Urenco is Britain, Holland, Germany. They say they're going to build this for us. It's going to cost $1 billion. So they put $1 billion into it. Oh, nope. Cost overruns are $2 billion more. Taxpayers pay for that. Isn't that nice? We paid for 2/3 of the very facility that they get to take the uranium for our own land through Rio Tinto over to Eunice, New Mexico, turn it into uranium, enriched uranium, sell it to us with a markup price, and compete against the fraud and the extortion and the money laundering that the Russians were doing for uranium. This was going on in our country. Hillary Clinton was making $145 million off of just one payment from one time from Uranium One to the Clinton Foundation.
And the crazy thing about that is that's just chump change in this whole cash flow.
Oh, yeah. That's the price of doing business. And don't forget that she, right before that, Bill Clinton got $200 million given to the Clinton-Justra Sustainability Growth Fund. And so what you're seeing here is wherever there's a big flow of money, the elite, the people who've been in power, who are now corrupt and no longer part of the government, they're no longer U.S. citizens. They're not even...
They're a higher power, isn't that Comey's new book? A higher...
Yes. What was a higher authority? Higher truth? A higher something? Yeah, he's higher than all of that. But remember, Comey basically worked for the Crown. He worked for Lockheed, which is basically, now we know, controls major parts of the British Crown and was in direct collusion with them. So whose side is Comey on? Comey's side.
Well, and now when you see this system that has been created globally, you begin to understand how the mainstream media plays into that. The mainstream media is paid for by this group, and the mainstream media's job is to keep the citizenry in the dark, to hide, to lie, to fool, to brainwash, to push out propaganda, to manipulate elections, to protect the elite, to keep the people in the dark. And yet, this is the real trick, to make it look like the Constitution's still working.
That's right. The Fourth Estate is supposed to keep the other states in line. We, the news, we, the journalists, the citizen journalist, the investigative journalist, are supposed to bring this fraud out, and then those people are supposed to be prosecuted. And if they aren't, the Second Amendment says we're supposed to take our weapons and start a new government.
Right.
And people who want to abdicate that or think that's stupid need to hear what we're saying. We're already in a revolution against them taking over the republic completely. Had Hillary Clinton came to power, it would have been a complete takeover from then on. That would have been it. We would not have had a republic anymore. So what are we doing? We're fighting the same enemies that we fought from the beginning. For instance, there's a guy in Holland, Walter Kleers. He owns every corporation, and you can't exist without his company, CT Corporation, allowing you to exist in America. You must incorporate, if you want to be a corporation, you have to go through a Dutch company. That's the Dutch East India Company, still controlling us. The British East India Company, we've already shown how those imperialists have come in through Serco. They work through SES. They work through OPIC, USAID. They work through Crown Agents USA, DC, so on and so forth. They work through all these agencies, right? And it's deep. What we need to do is simply call it out into the light and say no more. And what that will do is give a new revolution to America. We will end these wars against us by corporations and nations trying to disassemble the Republic of America and everybody getting their piece of the pie, because that's really what this is. This is just horrible greed.
Douglas, do you hear that giant sucking sound of dollars out of our pockets?
Oh, it's unbelievable. Michael, the work that you guys have done, and we'll take a general conspiracy theory and prove that, oh no, it's actually true. If only by the circumstantial evidence, we'll give you overwhelming circumstantial evidence and or direct evidence, and then you go in and get the indictable evidence, put it up on your crime line, and anybody who wants to know the truth can simply go there and search it. Put in the name, find out if they're SES, find out their history, find out their crimes. And that's what needs to happen. That's what we're supposed to be doing. And it is happening. And you see it now all over the place. We're seeing this just everywhere that it's becoming revealed. That's why we do so much reporting of the news and why we have so many of these audios out, because as we see these things happening, we want to call it out because people need to understand that there is a fantastic revolution going on, and we are going to win that first American Revolution against the British East India Company and the Dutch East India Company, and of course the Spanish, French, and British also incursion into America. And we're going to win that, and we're going to reestablish the Republic based upon getting rid of things like simply default on the U.S. Federal Reserve. We don't owe them any money. That's an onerous debt that was fake to begin with. Okay, we just made over $20 trillion. We can do simple things like that will shock people, because the U.S. Federal Reserve, there is no reason for them to exist.
Yep, defund the inputs to this closed system of war. That's how you do it.
Precisely. And it's very simple. You just don't hire transnational companies anymore. Lockheed, you want to work for everybody, including China and Russia and Syria, and you want to give weapons to Iran and everywhere else, you don't get any more contracts with us. And there should be no more corporate intelligence working for the United States government. That is how we have been overthrown in the last decade. No more corporate intelligence, period. And if you worked in intelligence, you can never work in corporate intelligence outside of it, or in anything that compromises what you know. Instead of a James Clapper going on along with a John Brennan and a Comey onto news shows to talk about literally top secret things they did that they, by according to their security agreements, must go to jail instantaneously for. You don't get, folks, you do not get a trial when you do what Petraeus did, or when you do what Hillary Clinton did and didn't get prosecuted, or when you do what Obama did when he sent messages to Hillary on an unsecure line, or Loretta Lynch, or any of those people. You go straight to jail. It is a crime against the United States government. This is not a civil action. These people need to be locked up, and then later determined exactly what their punishment will be. People call it tribunals. There doesn't need to be a tribunal. There's a quick hearing. A quick military hearing says, did you sign this, General Petraeus? He says, yes. That's it. He's done. His lawyer gets to talk. The Uniform Code of Military Justice, I was subject to it. I know. You really don't have any rules when it comes to those security agreements that you signed. And she signed them. Hillary signed them. Obama signed them. Loretta Lynch signed them. Comey signed them. Clapper signed them. Brennan signed them. All those people, by law, not only with their leaks and their actions and their coup d'etat and their attempt to rig the election and their associations with the dossier and Russians and foreigners like a British Christopher Steele. Why is it when they're Brits it's okay? Just because they're Five Eyes? No. The Brits have been our enemy. And as far as I know, except that they fought in wars with us, but they oftentimes joined those wars for false pretenses. And many times they were part of the banking systems that created those wars. So I don't really know when the Brits have been our friend. So I don't want to do business with them. I say the solution, very simple. You're a transnational company? Sorry. You can say you have a U.S. branch? Tough luck. If any part of your company doesn't pay taxes to the United States of America, you can't do business here. Bye-bye, Amazon. Bye-bye, Apple. Bye-bye, Facebook. Bye-bye, all the Silicon Valley companies. Almost none of them pay any taxes. Does anyone realize that these monopolies don't pay taxes? We got to get rid of all the monopolies. The Obama-supported Silicon Valley monopolies, they all got to go because they stole their inspiration. They stole the invention from Leader Technologies. And we have to just simply get back on the track. No surveillance of Americans. No war debt. No more war unless it actually is an incursion against Americans. It's very simple. And that's exactly what Trump is saying in most instances. We may say it in a shortcut version, but it seems as if if he keeps going in the direction he's going and gets a second term, in that second term, we can see many of these things come to pass as quickly as we've already seen him do things like no more climate accord. I'm building a wall. He's already built a huge portion of the wall. No more TPP. I'm doing bilateral agreements. No more China ripoff. No more China fake economic war. No more China cyber war. No more, what has he done already? He's already done many of these things. So it is within our grasp, it's within our reach to actually put an end to not only the crown's tentacle octopus that is surrounding America and sucking us dry, but also to a lot of the other nonsense that led to that, this war mentality and things like that you've so accurately described. So, Michael, do you got any good words of how we're going to end this, or any final words for our listeners?
You've just done a beautiful summary. I don't have anything to add right now.
That's pretty amazing. A little bird tells me that we're going to be getting together and having some conversations soon. And I understand that you have, as always, new and breaking ideas that literally could save the Republic if people would listen. So we're going to be talking about those in some audios coming up, perhaps even videos if Betsy says so. And we just continue
Look forward to it.
To be absolutely amazed at the work you're doing, and cannot thank you for the
your
collaboration.
Support.
All right, talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
Okay, bye-bye.